been a year since we have been Zooming for our services. We've come a long way since last spring equinox. And I want to share with you today a reading by Katie Romano Griffin called Know When to Tango. She writes, "When I find myself struggling with a person or group, I sometimes consider isolating myself from them altogether. That's when I retreat to a space where I can hear tango music. In an instant, I'm 8 years old again. I can smell the hot Cafe Bustelo percolating in the tiny pot on my grandmother's stove while she plays cards with my grandfather and his childhood best friend from Argentina. Music starts to play while my aunts and uncle move the furniture so they can dance. In mere moments, the living room becomes transformed into a space of expression, celebration, and connection. My mother and uncle are clearly the most skilled dancers. They settle into an easy rhythm together, floating across the old terrazzo flooring, the card players occasionally pausing to watch them. Order turns to chaos as everyone takes turns practicing steps on their own, and then we engage with other family members. We each bring our own skills, abilities, strengths, and weaknesses to tango, but always we seek to balance, feeling our way through the relationship of the dance with each new partner, and with respect and love for the person and the music's rhythm. The tango of my youth was not as inclusive as my sweet memory would lead me to believe. But I can smile at that memory and know that the spirit of tango extends beyond my 8-year-old understanding to a more inclusive dance, one that makes space for a theology of a better world on a dance floor of mutual respect with people of all genders, sexual orientations, abilities, races, and ethnicities." Yesterday was the spring equinox, and as we celebrate the occasion in worship today, we are mindful that the cycles of nature can symbolize personal and spiritual truths for us. At the equinox, day and night are equal length, mostly, and our minds are drawn to the idea of balance. Our thoughts might also turn to the promise of new life that comes with the onset of spring, but we'll delve more into that theme in a couple of weeks with our Easter service. So for today, we'll allow the concept of balance to occupy our attention. Physical balance is the ability to maintain the center of gravity of the body while minimizing postural sway. It's a state of bodily equilibrium, which we may think is about complete stillness, being free of opposing forces on all sides. But Einstein famously wrote in a letter to his son something that many people before Einstein had observed: balance is not about stillness. He wrote that life is like riding a bicycle. One maintains balance by forward motion. We have to keep moving if we want to be in balance. That may seem strange, but if you've ever held a balancing pose in yoga, you know that there are lots of little quakes and shakes going on in the body when you're maintaining your balance. You can't just hold everything rigidly still because you're going to fall over. Staying balanced is about continually shifting the body to make subtle adjustments. Your muscles are active and alert when you are finding balance. And the same is true of dancers. Balance in dance is a lot more about conscious movement than it is about stillness. Dancing requires these quick changes in the positioning of the body, especially in the feet and the ankles and the knees and the hips. Because the eyes are not fixated on a single point, good balance is necessary to make smooth, complete moves. So what if we adapt some lessons from the realm of dance into spiritual lessons for our lives? Because dancers are told the first thing about balance is to give yourself a solid base. If your base is wobbly, it's more difficult to hold a long balance. Now, that doesn't mean to make sure that the floor is flawless. Sometimes we don't get to choose what kind of floor we dance on in life. Giving yourself a solid base as a dancer means focusing on what you can control, your own body, giving your ankles some special attention by strengthening the muscles that allow for the side-to-side movement of the foot. So spiritually, maybe we would say, know where you confidently invest your faith. That can be giving yourself a solid base. If there's a spiritual tradition that really resonates with you, keep growing in your knowledge and your connection to that tradition. Know your personal scriptures, those words or ideas that you can go back to over and over again and discover new wisdom and truth to fuel your life. And keep reading them or listening to them. That's the part that is forward motion. And for some of you, that may mean your faith in God, in the words of the Bible, in the teachings of Christianity. Our Unitarian and Universalist traditions are based in that spiritual tradition. And so for you, it may mean a more deep reading of some of those familiar passages, a more deep connection with some of those familiar ideas, or a deeper foundation in your prayer life. For others among us, we are celebrating Ostara today, a pagan tradition. We worship nature or many deities rather than one. And maybe Ursula Goodenough's Sacred Depths of Nature is part of your personal scripture. So embrace that, read it more deeply, go back over those teachings, spend time grounding yourself in what you call sacred. For some of us, it's Buddhist or Taoist traditions or Stoic traditions without deities, but rooted in rich wisdom and deep ethics. Let that solid base be a foundation for your balance so that you know those personal scriptures, those words of wisdom, those insights deeply. You may be atheist, but drawn toward living with purpose according to our shared principles as Unitarian Universalists. Our tradition began with a solid base in Christian identity, but over the last century and a half, we've widened our perspective and our embrace. So your personal spiritual foundation might draw on a lot of different sources and traditions because there's something of value in all of them. So giving yourself a solid base for spiritual balance means becoming ever more aware of your personal spiritual foundation and ever more deeply connected to it. And if you don't know what it is yet, that's all right. You can engage in that pursuit and that journey of discovery mindfully. Another thing that dancers are told, though, is to strengthen your core. Of course, the muscles in your feet and your ankle and lower leg help maintain balance, but an engaged and strong core also plays a key role in finding your stability. So spiritually, maybe strengthening your core means knowing yourself. Beyond knowing the tradition that resonates for you, know who you are in light of that spiritual identity. Know your own personal guiding principles, the life-affirming values that provide boundaries and direction for your actions. Strengthen your connection to your deepest, most noble self by spending some quiet time every day checking in with yourself, touching base. In what times during the day are you proud of how you showed up? And when did you show up less consciously? Where did you honor your values and where did you betray yourself over the course of the day? Being more mindfully connected with your own values on a regular basis helps strengthen your spiritual core and live with greater integrity as you keep moving forward. Dancers are also told to practice without a mirror. Maybe you've got an image in your mind of a dance studio with that wall of mirrors so that dancers can watch themselves and keep track of how they're doing. But if you only practice and rehearse with a big mirror in a well-lit room, it might be more difficult to find balance when you're on a stage and you don't have that big wall of mirror next to you. So dancers are told to practice without a mirror to improve their balance. Spiritually, Maybe we translate that as set aside your anxieties about how other people see you. Other people's expectations can be really powerful influences in our lives. And when we choose not to meet their expectations, even then we can be kind of defiant about what we choose to do instead. So practicing without a mirror maybe means, rather than worrying about managing everybody else's emotions and wants and demands, we can live into our deepest values without worrying about how that looks to other people. Maybe that's the spiritual translation of dance like no one's watching. Now, that doesn't mean we disconnect ourselves from other people, though. Most of our life-affirming values are about how we cultivate meaningful relationship with others and with the world that we all share. Our connections with others can come from an authentic willingness to be who we are, though, rather than an anxious place where we're always checking ourselves to make sure we look okay to other people's eyes. Which also means we don't have to concoct excuses or justifications when someone challenges us. We can be honest about the places where we've slipped a bit, and we can let our anxiety carry us. Sometimes we let our anxiety carry us in a more hurtful direction, but we can sincerely and humbly ask for forgiveness, even though we may not always get it. And we can find balance by defining ourselves from within rather than giving other people our power. So practice without a mirror. Be your genuine, spiritually grounded self as you act with integrity to your core values. So if we want to be spiritual dancers, we can give ourselves a solid base in a meaningful spiritual tradition. We can strengthen our core and understand who we are in the midst of that tradition. And we can practice without a mirror and act with authenticity. Dancers are also told to find balance, they need to challenge themselves. If you've mastered the art of balancing, try doing it with dimmer lighting or with your eyes closed, or practicing on an uneven surface. Spiritually, I think there are obvious ways to keep moving forward and challenging ourselves. Always be learning something new or developing a new practice. Has meditation always been a challenge for you? Challenge yourself to find a style of meditation that works for you. Has time for introspection been hard to carve out in your schedule? Challenge yourself to make it a priority. Is a spiritual practice becoming a bit of a stale habit? Challenge yourself to dig deeper and renew your focus. When we challenge ourselves, we propel ourselves forward, and that forward motion helps us stay in balance. Dancers also test their limits. They take risks when they're improvising or not performing. Go further to keep off balance and maintain control. Maintain a pose just a bit longer. Suspend and reach just a bit more. Spiritually, I think we test our limits by setting mindful boundaries. One of the things that can really knock us off balance is a lack of boundaries. So don't wait until you're overwhelmed or utterly exhausted or about to explode to set a meaningful boundary. Be mindful about what you need and set conscious boundaries for your life and your relationships and maintain them. Those boundaries are sacred. Why set a boundary if we aren't even going to respect it ourselves? So test your limits by ensuring that the boundaries you set really do work and really do create the kind of spiritual container for your relationships and your own actions. And when they don't, you can clarify your boundaries and recommit to honoring them with a calm resilience. Dancers also maintain balance by finding a focus point. Directing your eyes toward a spot on the wall or a light at the back of the theater can help you keep your balance longer. Just be sure to keep your eyes off the floor. Keep them lifted with an outward focus. We've talked about this before. Spiritually, that focus point, in yoga, we call it a drishti, but that's the vision that you cast for your life, your relationships, and the world that we all share. If we want to effect change in the world around us, it can be tempting to focus on every little challenge or obstacle. But if we're willing to find a focus point and keep our eyes fixed on a vision for what we are creating, all the little obstacles along the way become less significant. We aren't thrown off balance by temporary setbacks because we have a clear destination that we're aiming for with our purposeful action. The same is true within our own lives or our own relationships. Keep your eyes fixed on what you want to create, your intended destination, and align your attitude and actions with that intentional goal in mind. If you want to have a peaceful relationship with your neighbors, make sure that your attitudes and actions reflect that focus point, that vision. If you want to build strong trust with your colleagues, align your day-to-day actions with that intention, that focal point. Find your focus point, and you'll maintain your balance more easily as you journey toward it. So, we can give ourselves a solid base in our spiritual tradition, strengthen our core with our own personal identities, practice without a mirror and act authentically, challenge ourselves and continue learning and growing, test our limits with intentional boundaries, and find a focus point to cast vision in our lives. There are a couple of more things that dancers do to maintain balance. First of all, they learn at the bar. They use the bar for support without relying on it completely. Balance is all about trial and error. And spiritually, we are not in this journey alone. We have one another for support. It's not healthy for us to completely rely on others to do the things that we need to be responsible for in our own lives. We have to let go of the support and learn our own strength and resilience and capability. But we can also keep that support within easier reach. When we have a hard time finding our balance or taking the next step forward, we can reach out to others in this community or other people with whom we've cultivated meaningful relationship. Physically, letting go of our support can teach us how strong our bodies are, that our muscles can hold and support us. Spiritually, we might not recognize our own resilience and inner strength until we allow ourselves a bit of vulnerability. But it's all trial and error. We experiment with how we're going to journey forward with integrity and purpose and grace, and we're going to get it wrong. That's just part of the journey. We learn from that and we keep moving forward and get better as we go, and we can rely on one another for support when we need it. And finally, dancers are told to tell themselves that they can do it. Negative thoughts are only going to bring you down, literally. If your brain isn't finding positive words to keep you stable, try picturing yourself perfectly balanced. I think in spiritual terms, that means we find hope. We seek out encouragement, whether it's another person or a song or a YouTube video or some of that personal scripture that we mentioned a little earlier. Develop a habit of hopefulness. Don't just wait for it to come along. Recognize that every moment is an opportunity to begin anew when it comes to living with deep intention and purpose, casting vision for your life and living into it with integrity. If you betrayed yourself yesterday because of some anxiety that got you tangled up, wake up this morning and tell yourself, today is a new start. Today things can be different. Today I can be different. And we'll talk more about that newness of life in a couple of weeks. But hope motivates us forward as we create balance by staying in motion. And we can create a habit of seeking out hopefulness and encouragement. So as you journey forward and seek balance this week and in the months ahead, I hope you give yourself a solid base and you'll be able to balance life's opportunities and challenges more gracefully. I hope you strengthen your core and understand who you are in the midst of your spiritual traditions. And practice without a mirror. Don't worry too much about how other people see you when you are acting with integrity to your values. Challenge yourself and keep learning and growing with something new, and test your limits with intentional boundaries. Find a focus point so that you can cast vision for your life and our community and the world around us. Learn to use your support even as you embrace your own strength. And tell yourself that you can do it. Build a habit of hopefulness. Any of these things that you choose can make your spiritual journey more balanced and resilient. And then we can dance more gracefully with whatever opportunities and challenges come our way. May you welcome that depth of care into your life. As we take a moment for reflection, you can close your eyes if you wish. Perhaps we find the divine in the natural world blossoming into new life around us as spring arrives. Or perhaps we locate the divine beyond the natural world in some inexplicable and unknowable place of the spirit. Perhaps we find the divine within ourselves, with deep roots and broad wings that carry us to deeper truths. Or we may discover the divine in others when we see them most clearly. Wherever we locate the divine, or whether we even think of anything as divine, perhaps the most obvious presence of the spiritual is in our dancing with one another. In our mundane lives, we have the opportunity to see our principles in graceful action, our deepest values in delightful play, when we dance with those around us and with our circumstances. An inclusive dance that confidently turns and shifts to each new discovery, each new possibility, that we might incarnate our deepest values in the practical reality of our lives, balancing effort and ease, inhaling and exhaling, balancing what we need and what we offer in love. Amen, and blessed be.